Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Brock Lawley program. My name is Brock Lawley. For my faithful listeners, I did take a little bit of a reprieve here. I was out of town, moving and shaking, hustling and shuffling, full plate. You'll have to just grant me some grace on that front. This is the segment where we tackle the news headlines, and I know a lot of you come here for them, and I'm very, very grateful that you do. So I promise to keep up the consistency. The stories of the day. Let's dive in. Eric Schmidt, Wall Street Journal, doesn't seem to like his cloak of green righteousness, and I have to admit that I share their sentiment. The taxpayers, the birds, the tortoises are all the big losers. And again, every single article I read on this front, it's pretty startling to me how much this mirrors a stand in religion. I mean, I've said that for years. It's so true. The language, the way they phrase things, it's very much a religion for those individuals who have discarded classic religion. And again, not to get into the hairline cracks of this, but it's important to point out that true religion, I am a born-again Christian, true religion is meeting the needs of those around you, the widows, the poor. But there's something bigger than that. Religion, seeing something greater than yourself, is baked into the cake, ladies and gentlemen. The human being, no matter how much they want to leave it behind like litter on the highway, they can't. It's literally a part of our DNA. It's the way we were created. The Green Gone Wild stuff is just the latest example of this. But these stand-in religions, what they do is they try to fill that void with something much more dangerous in the long run, because they fill themselves in as the deity in this religion. And you can see how that doesn't have the same parameters or reverence as your classic adherence to God's will. That is why that's so dangerous, because you see there is no means that is not sacrificed at this end, because you see they are on a righteous pursuit, just like how classic religion is often manipulated and contorted. Here we have a secularist religion truly finding their righteousness and mainly governing the affairs of other people. And that's to say nothing of the fact that the science continues to come back void when you really, really look at this stuff. But anyway, Eric Schmidt talking the Green Gone Wild game there. You can check that out, the Wall Street Journal. ISIS tortures and executes a leading lawyer who fought for women's rights. Quite frankly, there's no one that the Islamist hates more than a woman who wants to be free. No one. It's very similar, actually, in a lot of ways to a conservative black in America, or a conservative gay, or quite frankly, a conservative woman, the likes of Sarah Palin. There really is no bigger threat to leftism as exemplified in the Democratic Party in this country. Now, I'm not putting these two on equal footing. They're not. But it is similar, because ISIS sees any kind of voice coming with credibility. And this woman certainly had that as a huge threat. Executes the lawyer who spent her life, her professional talents, in the brave and elevated pursuit of furthering the rights of innocent women in this horrific environment of the world. This story reminds me that our life is bigger than us, that there are things more important than our own safety, than our own comfort. There's a lot of things this woman could have done, and she sacrificed her very life in this pursuit. Bravo, the New York Times reports that. Yale to host radical Islamist. And by the way, I've been to college. I'm sure this speaker will draw very, very large crowds. The Free Beacon reporting this. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that these very universities refuse to have conservatives come speak, and they refuse even more vehemently when asked to have Christian evangelicals come speak. Put that in perspective. They roll out the red carpet for a radical Islamist who openly and full-throatedly spews the most vile hate of our time. That is the moral backwards university today. The moral compass has been broken. Think twice before you send your children there and mortgage your house to do so. California continues to be an incubator of social engineering radicalism. It's really something to see. They keep stepping up their game. It's kind of like one of those sitcom trailers or something. You got to outdo the last one you just put out. Voting registration at 16 and plenty of other insanity to be consumed if you desire in the Golden State. So now you can vote by absentee ballot on the day of the election. Transsexual and transgender can have their death certificate reflect the sex of their choice, and 16-year-olds now pre-registering to vote. Do you recall being 16? Most 16-year-olds today, I would argue, probably don't know much about the civic universe that surrounds them. But you have to understand that today's left, and this has been true since the 60s, they actually make a little bit of an idol of the youth. A quick Middle East inside baseball comment here. I don't know if you've noticed, but you hear a lot about the Iraqi army and how we're going to be propping up the Iraqi army and how we're going to be passing off the security responsibilities, I suppose you should say, in Iraq to the Iraqi army. You hear this a lot from claptrap politicians. What you should know, and of course this would be something you would know if you had an actual media, you should know how bad things are in the actual Iraqi army. Yes, they scattered like cockroaches when tested by the force of ISIS, but the soldiers have now been commonly phoning their friends for ammo, for food, the underfunding, the complete decimation of the infrastructure of the Iraqi army is startling. New York Times reporting that. So remember that when Obama talks about that. I used an analogy before. I think it's watertight. It'd be as if FDR in front of the American people said that it was going to be the French via strong verbal support and encouragement. It was going to be the French left alone to push back Nazism 3 or 4 days after Paris fell. That's an equivalent. The Iraqi military is a joke. And to think that that's going to do anything, to think that that's the smallest hurdle to the very, very well-financed ISIS is just preposterous. And it means you don't know what you're talking about, and it means you're not committed, is exactly what that means. A radical Islamic Muslim convert beheads a woman in Oklahoma. I'm sure you've heard about this. I searched dozens and dozens of papers, and they devoted at most a paragraph to this story on Saturday after it happened. And 0 words, by the way, absolutely no ink spilt, pointing out that it was one of those bitter clingers, one of those guys with a gun that actually stopped this maniac from perpetrating his jihad on more innocent people. So the anti-gun crowd can't acknowledge that a civilian with a gun saves a life and stops terrorists in this country. It's painful omission of truth, you might say. But yes, they're calling this a workplace violence episode. That's what they seem to always call things. And again, just one more example of how the administration refuses to face intellectually and clearly verbally the enemy that we have before us. A man spouting off Islamic terrorist propaganda on Facebook and throughout social media. He's ensnared in a comment at work on how women should be stoned when they're unfaithful. And then the guy turns around and beheads his victim. The Obama administration can't find a breadcrumb trail of connection between Islamic terror and this incident. No, that's not the case. You know that's not the case. I know that's not the case. And it doesn't do us any good. It simply doesn't do us any good to deny the obvious. So the media and the administration continues to lie to the American people about this great threat that now clearly represents itself on our soil. These are the facts of that story. The beheader has direct Islamic ties. He stabs a woman. Then he takes the time to behead her. This, of course, after he had an argument with her about whether or not a woman should be, wait for it, stoned in America for being unfaithful. And Melissa Hart of MSNBC and many, many other talking heads on the left say it's preposterous for us to make a correlation between Islam and this incident. Ladies and gentlemen, you simply cannot have a civilization exist if they're under this degree of delusion. The acrobatic-like contortions they go to not call something straight that is right in front of their face. And I've always been struck by the irony. People like Melissa and so many others, they would be enemy number one, target number one of this enemy, if not for the protection of the very people that she loathes, people like the military, conservatives, and yes, this guy carrying a gun that put a justice end, and it's frightening. These people have power. They have power over protecting you, your family, your community, and yes, your nation. It's terrifying. LA passes a $15 minimum wage bill for workers. Sounds good, feels good, doesn't do any good. In fact, many, many will be put out of work because of this. Yes, the poor will suffer the most. Not to let reason or facts or the world as it is to get in the way of a good leftist feel-good yarn, though. So the LA Times is reporting that. Obama maligns the American police at the UN. I don't quite know why that was applicable. But yes, apparently the fact that, we have some sort of race, many would argue fabricated race kick up in the United States is a reason to throw America under the bus from our very president's lips at the UN. Absolutely incredible. cityjournal.org reporting that. Kids won't eat Michelle Obama's menu. Those stories just keep coming in. They just don't want Brussels sprout sandwiches and pea soup and whatever else. A little piece of kale, a carrot stick, perhaps. They're giving that the big Caesar's thumb down. So that's making more press. Found an interesting story about dozens of Japanese hikers that go looking for falling leaves. Find an exploding volcano. So life is a precarious thing. Check that out on the New York Times. I found that interesting. 2 cops shot in Ferguson. And I don't think you're going to hear anything from the president about how thuggery, killing the police, is a bad thing. I'm just wagering a bet. In fact, I don't think the media at all is going to talk about that. It just goes to show you the bias and the ridiculousness. The sad thing is that society is always hanging by a thread, and I'm no fan of the police state. In fact, I'm very, very, very much an opponent of it. But the thin blue line is needed, and the fact that we now have people just openly killing cops in the street. And, of course, this is a powder keg that the left continues to throw firecrackers upon with race-baiting, politicized speech. It's horrible, and people will be harmed, lives will be lost, many, many more, because race in America is a political tool, and it's sad, and it needs to be called out. There's a fascinating piece in the Wall Street Journal, Venezuela, how socialism and socialists can destroy a country. Quotes like, the people have taken control of Clorox factory in Venezuela. Clorox left because the government forced the operation to be unprofitable, imposition of price controls, etc. Many businesses, by the way, have followed suit, and the poverty is unbearable and strangling out people in that country. And yet, juxtapose that when you look at Brazil, when you look at Chile, when you look at Colombia, all thriving and thriving because of free markets and economic vibrancy. And yet we still have this debate. It's like we're talking about gravity. That's what it's like. It's like the left is still claiming that we're all Peter Pan, untethered to gravity, and the rest of us are just pulling our head out. I mean, the free market versus the collectivist socialist debate has been over for decades now, and yet we still have to suffer through this. And people's lives, again, one of the reasons people always wonder why I'm a conservative, a lot of fellow Christians are always asking, it's because I care about people. That's the biggest reason. I care about people. People are always the victims of this insanity, of this leftist utopian chase. It's poor people. It's people who can't get energy. It's children that can't see and realize their dreams because they're stuck in unnecessary poverty, because we still chase this man-made, utopian, socialist black hole, always ending in the same bog of eternal stench, sucking productivity, sucking innovation, sucking everything that's good into its vortex. It's painful to have to watch this, but we do. Here we go. Venezuela, a testament in how socialism destroys a nation of people and a culture. Wall Street Journal has the piece. And in a more lighthearted news story, you can now get a degree, and I believe it's Michigan, pretty sure it is. You can get a degree in beer brewing. Kind of gives new meaning to the term drinking your way through college, but you can legitimately get a degree in the art of fine brew, and I think it's kind of cool. I mean, the truth be told, with some of these microbrewers being profitable, although, you know, it is a little bit of a minefield because the price of grain and barley and all that stuff is through the roof, and you're also having a lot of taxes and a lot of impediments, but it's just as cool as any other, I suppose, field, and you can now officially acquire your beer brewing degree. So there you have it. Ladies and gentlemen, those are the stories of your day. Thank you for listening to the Brock Lawley program.